All right.
And we're live! Hello,
Yay.
everybody. Welcome back to the Beyond Mom Mode Challenge. I'm your host, Eri Kardos. Today, I have an amazing guest here, Leah Marcus. Leah and I have known each other forever. Oh my gosh, since grade school, I think. Since probably fourth grade when I moved to Mount Pleasant. So
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy. That's crazy sauce. And we did things, we did drama and whatnot together, and we had
Lots of whatnot. So
really
much.
weird friendships and experiences, and it was really fun. Lots of laughter, and then we grew up, we went to college and did other things, and then we became moms. And I think it's been really fascinating because for me personally, I've been following your journey, Leah, for a long time. But when you became a mom, and I don't know when Nurtured Heart approach came in and when momming came in, but those two things just made you like explode with sparkles and all the goodness. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, see, yeah, like before I became a mom, I was like the perfect parent, and then I had a child, and I was like, redacted. But yeah, no, I did learn Nurtured Heart before parenthood, so that's been an interesting angle to it, as opposed to people who are like in crisis and then they learn it, and so they've got kind of like the before and after kind of
You've been doing it since the start. So anyways, this is Leah Marcus. Leah's awesome. Leah, will you just tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, I am an introvert. I am a mom, as Eri mentioned. Before becoming a parent, I studied studio art, and I got degrees in that, and an art therapy and counseling degree. Worked as an art therapist and counselor for a while. Then I wanted to switch gears and go into mom mode, not beyond it yet. And I just always knew that, circumstances permitting, I wanted to kind of just focus on that. And so for a stretch, I've been home with my son, who's started kindergarten this past fall now. So switching gears again. And so I'm also a recovering perfectionist. I've dealt with a lot of anxiety. And so when I encountered the Nurtured Heart approach, there were some sort of serendipitous things of like my mom, who's also a therapist. She heard about a training around the same time I did. And so we went to one together. And after that one-day training, which was back in 2011, we were just like walking around outside, like we could finally see color for the first time. It was just like, our world was rocked. And that was a one-day training. And at the time, kind of my primary way of using it was as a therapist. And it really changed my whole approach to that work. People who were at our training come to it from, as parents, as educators, as mental health professionals. And so it really was a major paradigm shift for how I approach that work in a field that can be very problem focused.
Yeah.
And then it was, I don't know, a few years later when I was able to finally use it as a mom. But as a therapist, I had reached a point before I learned this where I was like, I don't think I'm cut out for this. Like, I don't know if I can do this work. I just get overwhelmed. I was leading a boys group, and it was just totally wrecking me like every week. There was all this intensity and a lot of big diagnoses and big like alphabets that these kids were carrying around with all these issues. And by the time I wrapped up my time at the agency I was working at, that I came back from the certification training, a 5-day like kind of intensive of Nurtured Heart, and was like, all right, I'm like, boys group take 2. I want to do it again. and had some of the same boys actually in the group. And it became the favorite part of my week because I finally knew, like, I know how to work with this energy. I don't have to make it go away. This intensity is no longer like this really scary thing that was triggering, you know, my like inner child to show up rather than present day adult. And so I just became playful and really empowered, and it was like, it
So
was
you're
amazing.
saying that if
So
this can work for a handful of quote unquote problem children, of
right.
children with some big challenges and huge emotions that are expressing them all the time,
Mhm.
without giving a fuck, then it can work for our toddlers and our children growing up.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It is for intensity wherever and however that shows up. So for me, a lot of my intensity is inward. I don't act it out, but it's there. And so I have learned to use these tools inwardly with myself. Um, so I'll back up and like talk a little bit about the origins of the approach itself, if that's cool.
yeah, I'm like, we don't even know what nurtured heart approach is.
Yeah, what is it?
So
I'm really good at getting ahead of myself.
yeah, maybe just like a super high level of like, what is this? I mean, are you talking about
Yes.
passing out magic pills? Are you talking about playing a game? Like, we have no idea. Like, what is
Yes.
nurtured heart high level? And then tell us where it came from.
Yes. So nurtured heart is, I call it kind of, it's been described a lot of different ways. One way to think about it is sort of a curriculum for relationship. It is another language. It's learning a new language, and it's learning some tools that all work in concert together to be really impactful. And so there are kind of 3 stands that make up the approach, and they're like legs of a stool. You know, you need each of them in order for it to really shine. Although each part also has its place as people are learning it. So it was kind of developed by, it was developed by a therapist named Howard Glasser in the 90s. He was working with families and adults, and he was realizing, he kind of almost got these downloads from the universe that were informed by his own experience as an intense kid. He was realizing all these techniques and methods that we learn in school, in therapy school, when it comes to really, really heavy hitter, like intense kids, this stuff is backfiring. It's making it worse. And then we apply it more and more and more. And then everything's escalating. So what is going on? And so he started really paying attention to, again, his own experience as an intense child himself, what worked, what didn't work. And started reading kind of the energy of the room. There was another thing kind of running the show below the level of what we're saying to each other. And it's the same kind of energy as when you walk into a room and somebody's really upset, like, oh, you can sense it. And so this approach is really a way to kind of learn to read that and learn to kind of channel it differently, and for everybody involved to get to be the hero of the story. So nobody has to be the bad guy. It's really kind of, the culprits are just the techniques, the tools that we had, and nobody has to be the problem here. Because everybody's doing the best that they can with the tools that they have. And so there are these kids, these wonderful, intense kids with a lot of life force, and it's like they are like a Ferrari. They've got a Ferrari engine and the suspension of a Model T. Like they're the brake system of a model. I don't know cars, but that's the idea, is that like, oh, okay, we don't want to like take their engine out and give them a Model T engine. We want to just give them the environment, the energetic environment that will celebrate what is there and help direct it into new heights, into just these amazing ways, without having to make any of that energy go away.
Wow.
There's a big push to medicate kids, and Nurtured Heart is not like hard and fast, no medication for things like ADHD or anything like that, but rather it kind of posits like if there's an approach that can really make profound foundational changes in the day-to-day just flow of life, why not start there?
Yeah.
And that way also, we know who gets the credit. There's, after meds wear off or before they're administered, this is helping support. Okay, what then? What about those times? And yeah, so it can fit in with and support a lot of other what people are already doing. And it helps identify areas where we might accidentally be getting in our own way in applying different things. So
I just want to clarify really quickly. I'm hearing
yes.
that the nurture heart approach works really well for children with fast engines, with lots of energy and all sorts of kind of all over the place. Can it work for any person, any child,
Yes.
or is this like specifically for those people?
So it really shines with intense school-age kids. However, the first book that came out was called Transforming the Difficult Child, and it was also kind of almost like transforming even the concept of the difficult child. And then parents were like, I don't want my kid to see this book with this title, and what are they going to think? So now there's a new workbook called Transforming the Intense Child. But there's also, as Howard Glasser was going into schools or going into, Head Start facilities and things like that, people are like, okay, cool. We're going to have you work with all these really challenging kids. Great. We'll have you see them and use this on them, and then we're golden. And Howard was like, that's not going to work, because this is about providing such profound emotional nourishment for these kids, who in general really only get noticed and appreciated, energetically kind of visible when things are going wrong. They've got a pretty negative kind of portfolio, as we would say. Once they start getting this juicy connection in this other, for things that are going right, all these other relatively invisible kids who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're going to be waiting in the wings. They're just understudies. So this really is about the whole climate of the household, the whole classroom, the whole school. It doesn't need every single adult to be on board, but it's about connection. It's about relationship. It's about giving a vocabulary of identifying and really amplifying little moments of things either going right or not going as wrong as they could. And just amplifying that, so that kids get a different image of themselves. So I want to back up a little bit. I mentioned kind of the negative portfolio. So there's this idea in Nurtured Heart that that we use stories to kind of tell, to kind of convey these concepts. And so one of the first stories that we tell, that we kind of try to convey, is called Toys R Us, and it's not the store, but it's this idea that, if you think about what a kid does when they get a new toy, they push all the buttons, they try to see what it can do, they mess with it and see if it lights up, does it make noise, what's happening here. And we're like the most interesting, fascinating toy possible. We have infinitely more features than anything you could buy in a store. We can yell, we can lecture, we can have amazing facial expressions, we can laugh, we can do, so we do so many things. We're very compelling. And so one of the fundamental things to get about nurtured heart is this idea that like we've got a lot of power and a lot of influence. Sometimes it's influence that doesn't feel good. Sometimes we don't want to have that much power, because then, you know, that means that if we're not acting the way we normally would act, you know, that influences our kids too.
Yeah.
They're watching everything. But so we light up. We get really, really interesting. We convey a lot of intensity. And a lot of times we do that most potently when things are going wrong, when our child or our student is doing something we don't want. And that can show up as yelling. It can show up as like, okay, I'm going to take you aside right this second, and you're going to smell my perfume, and we're going to have this big heart to heart right here, right now, in the context of you acting out. Or if I'm a student, oh, I get to go down the hall to this nice lady and spend time with her, and I get to leave the classroom and all this stuff. And so it's all kind of upside down, the times when we deliver our love, our relationship, our intensity, our engagement is often in the context of behaviors we don't want to see. So then we're ending up like watering a lot of weeds.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why, you know, why doesn't my good job or my thank you go very far? And that's because the energy is kind of upside down. We're showing up, or, you know, our timing's off. And so if we accept that we are our child's favorite toy, then we get to determine, we get to work on figuring out, okay, what are our buttons? What do they do and not do? And when they are pushing our buttons and we can convey to them that those buttons don't work anymore. These buttons work. When we can convey, I am no longer going to be available for those behaviors, but I'm going to save all my juicy, beautiful, loving connection for the good stuff, for the stuff I want to see more of. Then once we can really consistently convey that, which can happen in just little moments throughout the day. We're not talking like giant overhaul necessarily. You can get a whole new kid. I mean, because then they're like, oh, finally, it's like clean energy.
Yeah.
I don't have to live this identity of this wild kid who just screws up, who can't do anything right, in order to get you. And so this stuff, like the acting out and everything, I want to be clear that it's not about they're manipulating us. It's manipulation. Kids just have this beautiful way of reading where more is. Yeah. They know how to get more, and they need more. We need connection. So, you know, they're gonna take the way that gets the most from us the quickest. And sometimes, you know,
I was gonna say, this is just such beautiful, perfect timing, because the moms who are watching this are sitting at home, trapped in their house. You know,
I'm among you. Yes. Oh my gosh.
We're all self-quarantining, and there is some point in time, if you haven't hit it already, when this is exactly what you need, right? It's how we're hitting these points of like, whether or not you have a quote unquote intense child, they are going to be intense for a little while.
It's an intense situation. I mean, we're just living. Yeah. Yeah. We don't have our usual outlets. We don't have our usual ways of connecting. So I mean, I come to you as like, here, I'm conveying this, but like, oh my gosh, you guys, I've like been really working hard today to remember this and to use it, because it can be very easy to slip into like reactive parenting. It's an extreme situation we're living through right now. But what that also means is there's a lot of free floating intensity around. And one of the things I've loved as I've learned deeper and deeper levels of nurtured heart is, you know, it started out as being for intense kids, and then it broadened to like all kids. And then it was like, well, wait, workplaces need this. And like, romantic couples need this.
Yeah, as a relationship, I'm already thinking, oh my God, this should be so helpful for couples.
Yeah. Well, then it's like, wait a minute, we need this ourselves. So, you know, people would learn this, and then we would be kind of hitting a roadblock of like, whoa, wait. So it's not, there's something that was keeping it from landing all the time with kids, and that partly came from adults trying to shift a child's trajectory, but inside themselves they were like really yanked up. They were like having trouble managing their own inner intensity, and so the delivery of Nurtured Heart was kind of getting diluted, or it just was not having quite the impact. So so now there's this whole like inner Nurtured Heart that's kind of newer in the trainings actually, and it's just like such a game changer facet of this. So I want to jump to like what the actual 3 stands are of Nurtured Heart, just to be clear here. All right, so as I mentioned, Nurtured Heart has 3 stands. As a side note, I just want to be clear too, that like there's 1-hour versions of this like nutshell thing. There's 3-hour, 6-hour, 6-week. What I'm going to talk about tonight is not like the whole enchilada. It is a lot of it. There's certain things that we try to convey in a certain order in order for it to really make sense, because some aspects of it are like, well, yeah, totally common sense, and other aspects are like, what? Like really counterintuitive. So I wanted to try to present this in a way that what I want to do is just blah, and just download it into your brain. But I can't do that. So I'm like kind of fighting this urge to just like blurt everything out.
Well, I'm here, you're going to give us the tip of the iceberg, and then if we want to learn more, you're going to tell us how we can find you and find out more about
absolutely. Yes. So there's 3 stands that basically in any kind of troubleshooting scenario of like, what do I do when my kid blah blah blah, it's a matter of like getting more squeaky clean with one or the other stand, and a lot of times that will just kind of take care of it. So the first stand, the first commitment that we make when we're like, I want to live this, because it's more of a lifestyle than it is a tool to pull out, is absolutely no, which sounds negative, but what it means is I refuse to give my best to negativity. I refuse to show up for, I refuse to blow my top for a behavior I don't want to see. And I refuse to not just also leak it in little ways. I want to save all that up. And so stand 2 is absolutely yes. And that is, I will relentlessly energize and show the hell up and just really be there in more and more vibrant ways, which we teach, for the good stuff, for not just the good stuff, but the not as bad as usual stuff, but any little like mini tiny microscopic version of movement toward what we want to see. This is a hard part, because a lot of times we've got an image in our mind of what respect looks like, what success looks like, what obeying looks like, what whatever looks like. And for these kids who are really intense, they've got to work so extra hard to just get to baseline, that their very best we might not notice it if we're just expecting a certain bar, a certain level. we're missing so much good stuff that we could be growing, helping them grow and magnify. So stand 2 is like, I am just going to be a detective of greatness and just find any little bit and grow it and grow it. Stand 3 is absolutely clear. So people might, when they are first learning this, a lot of times they think, oh, it's about ignoring bad behavior and catching kids being good. And it's not that. It's active. It's not about ignoring. It's about noticing, okay, this is happening, and I'm going to be watching for the very next moment of stopping that behavior, and I'm going to jump in and celebrate what I do see. It can feel really weird when you start doing that, because people are like, why do I need to be applauding my kid for like stopping hitting? But I promise, like, it makes sense in the flow of using this approach. So absolutely clear is about, stand 3 is about, what are my rules? What is my yes? What is my no? Where is my line? Because intense kids are going to act out until they find the line. They want clarity. Basketball games would be no fun if there was no like outside court boundary. Again, I don't know sports. I'm not a sports person, but like, or if the refs were just like, I guess I'll blow the whistle for that, but like, not for that was just like a little toe over the line. Like, nobody would want to go to that game. And so it's about like really knowing what are our rules, and really knowing when they're not being followed. Like, is it a little bit of swearing? Is it a little bit of hitting? That counts. So it gets what we call a reset, which is just a very unceremonious, boring kind of invitation to try that again. So this is the piece that I promise you we could talk about it all night, and it's not going to be. It's harder to learn this part. In the certification trainings, we spend an entire day on it. The reset piece, because they're like, people are like, so what's the consequence though? Because we're so in this mindset of like, we've got to find the perfect consequence for this behavior and da da da. And it's like, if we're so focused on like, do I take the phone? Do I do this? Do I do that? Then those things get all the power. And then you and I, as parent and child, don't really get any of it. And then nobody feels good about it. Whereas, if it's like, oops, like that's a reset, but look at you now. You didn't talk back. You didn't throw that controller. You didn't break anything. You're just accepting my no, and you're trying again. I see you already going to your room to start cleaning it up. Whatever it is, finding what we do appreciate and going after that. Kids learn like they don't have to, they're not attached to breaking the rules anymore, because that's not how they get us. So it stops being worth it, because, behaving kindly and with self-control and all these other qualities that we want to grow in them, that is much more compelling and gets us more connected to them. And that's where the relationship comes in, rather than fighting over a phone or an iPad or whatever.
I love it.
So those are the
I need more of if you could walk me through one example of something like a preschooler would do. I'm totally taking advantage of the fact that I have preschoolers. I'm interviewing you.
Yeah.
Something a preschooler would do, hitting or something, or taking a toy. Something. If you could walk me through, can you just give me like a scenario of like how you would think about this from a nurtured heart approach?
So I will start off saying that nurtured heart when people are first learning it, it can sound really wordy, because the examples that we often give for giving recognitions, you know, they can, it's basically saving the lecture for the good stuff. So we can kind of end up lecturing our kids about what's awesome about them. And we can go on and on. And what I love about it is that it teaches some pretty big deal vocabulary to kids. They learn, you know, at 3 years old, the word flexibility and what it means and what it feels like in their bodies for them to show it. But that can be like, whoa, that's so many words. So there are some adjustments that we make for little ones, which is possible because this is about our relational energy. And so it doesn't always need a lot of words. Words kind of help it land. But, you know, if we're really clean about showing up inwardly for, if we're not, you know, saying like, oh, I love how you got that pencil, like, you know, when we're congruent, then, you know, we can adapt it to lots of different ages. For example, like using it with a preschooler and using it with an elementary schooler and using it with a teen. Those are going to sound different. They're going to look different. They're, you know, with a teen, you're going to do a lot more like drive by or like texting it to them, things like that. So when my son was a preschooler, he wanted yogurt. It wasn't in my vision for the day. I said no to yogurt or whatever. I don't remember why. Now I'm just like, give him the yogurt. But for some reason I said no. And what I love is that with this approach now, I don't have to be afraid to set limits, because I get to celebrate any little bit of those limits being honored.
Awesome.
And I'm not afraid of like emotion that shows up, because yay, it's energy to work with. So basically I said, you know, no, like mama doesn't want you to have yogurt right now. Here are the things you can have. And then my son just, he just got so sad, and he was crying. He was really mad. And so I, with this lens, got to look at it rather than like, oh no, he's freaking out because I said no to the yogurt. Like, what do I do? Oh, maybe I'll give it to him. I don't know. I got to just be like, look at you. Like, you are having such a hard time. You are so strong right now. Feeling those big feelings. You're not hitting me. You're not screaming. You're not trying to throw anything at me. You are just feeling those big feelings. Do you know how many adults have a hard time with that? Like, look at you and your self-control and your strength. And I just like, I don't know how much he even heard of that, because he was crying. But I was just nearby, and I was really wanted to be clear and clean inside myself about what am I here for. It's not about like reset and then I'm going to like leave my 2-year-old, 3-year-old. Like, that's not how it looks. But energy wise, I knew like, I'm not going to talk about the crying necessarily. Like, I personally feel like crying's healthy and really important. So that's not a thing to reset anyway. But, you know, there's ways that people convey their upset feelings that are not healthy or that we don't want to see more of. And so any little bit that isn't that, you know, I'm going to talk about. And so then my son like got his tears out, and then he looks at me and he's like 2.5 years old or something. He said, I can calm down. Like, I'm like, I gotta go text my mom now. It was like, it was amazing, because I, you know, and I have video of him as like a 2-year-old just toddling around and saying, I used my words. Like, it's wild. It's so beautiful to be able to help craft a self-concept and to hear it back, to be able to hear it being formed.
Yeah. Wow.
And there's that quote about like the way we talk to our child becomes their inner voice, like no pressure. But, you know, so this is kind of this beautiful, empowering way to really do that. Like my son's been having video chats with his classmates this week, which is really saving my butt right now. Because it's just us at home. But, you know, I'll hear the way he talks to his friends, and he'll just be like, oh, that's so creative. And, just, you know, just energizing them and their choices. It's just like, yeah.
So good.
Yeah, and they're just, I have a couple little stories like written down. You know, my son will just say things like, I'm the one who keeps going. I'm a helpful boy who knows how to do things. Just one day, this was a couple of years ago, we were leaving a play day, and he said, so he was 4, I guess. He said, Mama, I want to tell you something. Henry was so politeful when we had to leave. Let's make up his own terms. That he was saying that, yeah, that he was saying that he noticed that this kid like let us take our vehicles home, even though he really liked, you know, he was. This is not about like, I'm going to energize this person and I'm going to just make them feel so good and they're going to react this way. This is about providing evidence. This is about saying, I'm going to hold on to the power to determine how I see you right now. And right now, there's some pretty amazing evidence of some pretty amazing qualities. And I'm just going to tell you about them. Do with that as you will. So when people are learning this, some kids are giving their parents like the weirdest looks, like, why are you talking to me like this? Like, what? Or they'll be like, oh, stop. And honestly, that if you get any resistance, it's like, that means they're listening. That means you're having some kind of impact. That means they're saying, do you mean it? Is this how it's going to be now? Because it feels really good. And if you're just going to stop, I don't want to open up to this yet. You know, for some kids who are so used to being visible for certain things and invisible for all the effort they do make, they've got quite a guard that they keep up. It's hard to get under the radar. And so even if we're thinking we're being so positive, thank you, awesome, good job, da da da, if it's not evidence-based, if we can't point to like, actually, you made it to school on time, you sat down, you got your stuff out, nobody asked you to, you got your pencil out and you're looking at me, that shows incredible respect and executive function and planning and self-control and blah, 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 blah. Like, we can go on and on and on and provide the evidence that's irrefutable. That's going to land way differently. And you can't really, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I did. You know, so they'll have like middle schoolers and stuff just being like, yeah, thanks for noticing that. And
okay.
I mean, I'm someone, for my husband to compliment me, I'm just like, oh, stop. Oh. Or they get all weird. Like, I don't, you know, it's not like, oh, thank you. So
you don't let it land. So many of us are so guarded because of the message we were given when we were younger, right? That inner critic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or we attack, you know, we're the piece about the inner nurtured heart, that using this with ourselves has been so transformative for me, because it's like, what do I show up to myself to blah, blah, blah. What do I show up the most for with myself? Is it all the amazing efforts I make throughout the day to, like, especially right now, to make life feel any degree of normal? No. It's the time I yelled, and so it's like, we really have to shift inwardly, like, what are we showing up for with ourselves? What credit are we giving ourselves? And it's not enough to just kind of sort of think it. So the more recent kind of developments with inner nurtured heart, there's this kind of coaching model called Sarah. I don't even know if I'm supposed to teach this, but I'm going to, because it's like, we need it. It's an acronym, and it's accompanied by breathing, and kind of, you can visualize your your body is like all the trillion cells of your body. Each one of those has a straw that leads to your heart. So you just breathe through all of those straws, those trillions of straws in your body into your heart. And really just give yourself a moment to recognize either somebody else or yourself. I've been doing this like every day in the shower. I do it out loud. I record it into my phone. Because when I'm really in my heart space, a lot of times I don't remember what I'm saying. But I want a record of that. I want to go back, be able to go back to that. And it's stuff that's really kind of, it's being backed up by brain science, by interpersonal neurobiology, by just the concept of co-regulation. Like, we can't really expect a child to regulate if we're not regulated. And so now when we teach resetting, it's like, you can't, so many parents are like, what do I do when if my child won't reset? If I'm like, okay, reset, and they won't do it. It's like, well, first of all, it's not punitive. It's an invitation. It's, oh no, you forgot your greatness. Let me help you back into it in this next moment. And it's a very in the moment approach in general. Fundamentally, it's in the present moment. We don't want to carry around our own rap sheet of all the things that we've screwed up on. Kids don't either. We want fresh chances, and especially now. So, it's like we need to reset ourselves before we can really reasonably expect a child to shift their behavior. They're feeding off of us.
Yeah. So let's pause here, because it's a beautiful place. The Beyond Mom Mode challenge is really about the mom, about the full woman. And so many amazing parenting tools apply to relationships, and especially apply to our relationship with ourselves. So what I'd love to do is really pause just here for a moment and say, what is something that the moms can do just for themselves, not necessarily for their kids? How do they remember their greatness?
Yes.
How do they reset?
Yes. So I would like to demonstrate the Sarah.
Yes,
that's
please.
Cool.
I thought you were gonna hide it. I was like, no. I feel like Sarah's really different.
No. Okay, so I'll use myself as an example. This is what I'll just do one right now. And I do this throughout the day when I need to really reset myself and really get new perspective. So the S of Sarah stands for I see or I sense. The A stands for appreciate, what I appreciate about that. The R is what that reveals about me or about you. The second A is just kind of claiming like I am or you are. And then the H is a prompt to just breathe it into your heart. Right now, so what I see in myself right now is that I didn't cancel this talk just because of this stinking virus.
Yay!
I showed up and I showered today. I'm not even wearing pajama pants. I put actual clothing on, top and bottom. And I used my tools today. I ate food and I drank water and I did some Legos for a while. And yeah, I just was present as best I could be. And when I wasn't, I shifted into awareness. What I appreciate about that is historically this would have been absolutely like, I just can't do it. I don't know. The world is crazy. And I would have gone invisible. And so I appreciate that I am letting myself be seen, that I am sharing some of the most precious bits of my learnings with whoever needs to hear them. And I also appreciate that I have tried to have a sense of playfulness and sense of humor about all this too, rather than trying to present some kind of super fancy polished something, or something scripted. So what that reveals about me is a whole lot of growth and change, and vulnerability, and courage, and congruence to use the tools that I'm teaching, and improvisation. And so I am claiming the greatness of, I'm going to take a second and just listen for what comes up. I am the greatness of spontaneous presence and cultivated wisdom. And often by the time I get to that point, I can breathe again. A lot of times tears come. I use so often when I am faced with the urge to go invisible. As I mentioned right at the top, I am an introvert, and wow, it's hard to get recharge time. And so my oftentimes my default is to just kind of go away in one form or another, and including away from myself, and just kind of go numb. And so when I am realizing I have not felt something in a while, I turn to this practice, and I don't know, it's like waking up a limb that went to sleep. It's except not painful. My biggest obstacle, honestly, is like some voice going, oh, I don't really need to do the whole thing, all the letters, and da, 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 da. But honestly, like, if I only do S, if I only do SA, it's something. It's a big step, but in terms of like really resetting, it's really powerful to really give myself that whole
thing
process. And it takes like a minute, but it's amazing how easy it can be to talk yourself out of even giving yourself a minute.
Can you
But
say
it
it one more
just,
time now that we've heard it? Can you say what the acronym
yeah.
is?
So I see or I sense, which is just kind of the nuts and bolts of like what you're actually observing right in this moment. And then what I appreciate about that, and that could be what isn't happening, that could be, or it could be something about what is happening. And then what that says about you. So what kind of qualities is that tied to, that you want to claim, and, get kind of, let's say ballsy, but that's so like masculine, but, just kind of get bold with like actually claiming that, because you've given yourself the evidence with the first letter.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I've seen. And so, if I were saying this to somebody else, what would I say that says about them? And claim that for yourself. And then the second A is to really claim it with I am this quality, and then breathe it into your heart. So I want to acknowledge you, Eri, for this whole experience you've created. You've just manifested it, and I do see you just freaking doing it, just being like bold and making moves and creating programs and traveling all over this planet and saying yes to yourself over and over and over, and saying yes to the world and more parts of the world than I've ever seen. And I am in awe of that. What I appreciate about it is it gives all kinds of permission to everybody else in your path, in your wake, to see that and be like, oh, to know what's possible. You spread possibility with every day that you live. And it scares me. It's exciting. I don't know. It's just really like shakes me up. And I do appreciate that. What it reveals about you is that you have a zest for life that is really needed. You are alive. You're so alive. And your work is life-giving. You are, this definition of yes and, life of and. Yes, you come too. Yes, sure, join in. There's no scarcity. There's no competition. And that's really helped reset me a lot from some big old scripts, some old default settings. And so I accuse you, there's another A, I accuse you of being the greatness of wild permission and bountiful invitation and just fun and play and deeply knowing what life is for.
You are trying to get me to cry. You are succeeding.
No, I'm just giving you the evidence. just laying out the evidence. This is what you have done by creating this space, by learning all this friggin' technology, and trusting. Oh my gosh, like that's hugely vulnerable to make this thing and not know who's going to show up, and to invite and invite and invite and just love on whoever shows up, and not have it be about any kind of contest or status or anything. And it's amazing. Yeah. You're welcome.
I feel so seen.
And that's really what so much of it is. It's like it's seeing through a whole different lens. And so what it has done for me, speaking of, our selfhood as moms and as people, before I learned this, my energy supply, I thought of it, because I think in images all the time, and I just thought of it as kind of like a gas tank. And then when it was empty, like, this is done, I'm done, I'm out, fend for yourself, look out, like, well, and so when I learned this, it was like, oh my gosh, my whole energy system shifted to like a solar panel. And so the more that I'm in this approach, the more I live it, the more I just live the three stands with myself, with my son, with my husband. It's hard to do with the people we're closest to, by the way. Cool. With like grocery clerks, with whoever, like my Lyft driver from the airport, like just whoever. The more I'm in that flow and using that lens, the more it is rewiring my nervous system to stay in that. And the more it is reconfiguring my default settings of anxiety and perfectionism and comparison. And the more energy I have. I would come home from work like having learned this early on. I would come home from like a long day working in community mental health and being like, I have no business being this energized, but it just feels so good to use. And I say use, but like it's just a whole different paradigm, and it's got to be genuine. You can't BS it. So you're actually for real seeing things that way. And so it's not, I want to be really clear, like, this is not about pretending things aren't bad. It's not about pretending certain aspects of life don't exist. It is about, in some ways, it is about fully, deeply feeling your feelings, whatever intensity comes into your being, and then saying on some level, here's some fuel. What am I going to do with it? I don't even need to label it. I don't need to, if it's helpful, you can, but I used to just really try to like not rock the boat of my mood. And so I'd get really freaked out when I would feel intense feelings. And now I instead, I'm learning to reset to like, some energy. So even getting ready for this talk tonight, I was like noticing my body was like exhibiting signs of being agitated. It's like, well, I'm all sweaty and I'm all jittery. And then I was like, oh, okay. Yay, energy. Like, here's something I can work with. And so I was like, ooh, what if I I just kind of reset that thinking to feeling like I was getting ready for a date. Like, I get to go talk about what I love, and like go, and then it just totally shifted that. So it's not like this false positive. It's not a bypass. It's like jet fuel. You can light a match and blow yourself up with it, or you can use it to really go to a whole new level. It's fuel. And so, intensity is not the enemy. Intensity is not the enemy. And, what I would encourage people to do little by little is to just first start out by noticing what really gets you to show up. If we're like taking any little scrap of downtime, of quiet time in our day, when our kids are, occupied with something, and we're like, oh, thank God, and we're on the couch, and we're like, oftentimes that's what we do. We tune out when things are going well, when things are peaceful. And that's really, Nurtured Heart invites us to show up for those moments, and just kind of pepper in some verbal appreciations of like, you're so focused right now, or just like, look at you being patient, and just kind of these little drive-by nuggets of like, I see you, I see you, I see you. Most of there's a few different types of recognitions that we teach, kind of different levels of complexity, different levels of depth, but the biggest ratio of those that we should be using is just little simple ones that are like, I see you using the purple crayon, just really like fundamentally, there you are, here's what you're doing. Like, you're explaining it to somebody who's on the phone and not there. And that like just shifts that energetic ratio. So when stuff does hit the fan, we have made deposits in this other way. So, as we're trying to like shift the energy right side up, so we are almost always showing up for the good stuff, and just kind of enforcing rules in a very boring way, and refusing to be really animated for the not so good stuff. It just changes the whole climate. The good kind of climate change. Yeah. So there are so many different ways to learn this. I love to to work with people and go deep and teach people this in a way that really helps them feel seen and is very personalized. But it's kind of like getting in shape. Like some people want to be at a class, some people want to just be at home by themselves. Some, so there's online classes. I'm trying to venture into that world because normally I would be doing in-person training. There's tons of books. There's all kinds of stuff. So there's lots of access points. And I
You
list
provided
a
your
lot of those.
website and your information so they can reach out to you and get all of this stuff. You can also post any resources you want in the group. We'd love that.
Cool.
I was thinking about this moment you were describing the couch when the child is occupied. I pictured myself on the couch. It just seems like Nurtured Heart approach is a lot about being generous with seeing greatness, and not only in your child but also in yourself. So taking that moment when your child is, being so focused on something and noticing their focusedness, but also then using the Sarah. That's a great time for you to turn around and be like, instead of distracting myself with Facebook or any other thing,
which is
I
so
can
tempting.
give myself this gift of refueling myself, of being generous with seeing my own greatness in this moment, because it's going to give you a lot more than distractions, right? Which
absolutely. And I want to say to all the totally like tapped out, exhausted moms out there, and teachers and whatnot, this is not about, here's the thing you have to somehow muster even more energy to give to. This is not about that. This is about like, look at the energy you're already spending and shift where it goes. It's the same energy, because we're already exhausting ourselves, showing up really big for stuff that is like driving us crazy. And so it's about like, okay, do I want to keep exhausting myself, spending the energy there in a way that doesn't feel good and it doesn't feel renewing? Or do we want to rechannel it? And so, as we use this approach with our kids, we teach them how to rechannel their own intensity. So then there are just fewer moments of blow-ups or these behaviors we don't want to see because they're using their own energy differently. So it's
so good.
I could literally talk about this all day. I have before.
I know. I'm like, this is the hardest one. Not the hardest one. Don't me to stop. I want to just go deep in this. This is so cool.
Yeah.
And Nurtured Heart approach is definitely on my list of trainings that I want to go through at some point in time. I have a big list of things I want to learn, but this is on my short list. So
those certification trainings, oh my gosh, I wish I could go to one every day. It's 5 straight days of everyone around you just, they will not stop until you see your greatness and feel it. And it's just like such a love fest. I have not experienced anything like it, because like toe to tip in this whole organization, they live it. It is so congruent. Like in their communications, it's just like they see the world that way. And so it's not like peel back the curtain and they're all like talking trash about it. It's like everybody's Mr. Rogers. It's amazing. God. And so, yeah, I mean, people will go there and they're like, is this a cult? But no, it's not. It's just, people are shocked when I'm at those trainings. They're shocked to hear that I consider myself an introvert, because I'm like, da, 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 hey, what's up? And so I was realizing at the latest one I went to, it was like, maybe I don't find people exhausting. Maybe I find all the things that separate people exhausting. The small talk and this and that is just kind of like, we're not really
real
connected. Yeah. So.
Yep. Yeah. So good. Leah, thank you so much for being a part of this experience, for all the ways you're showing up for these moms, for yourself, for just modeling that there's a whole other way of being that is going to feel a little bit awkward to try, but can lead to so much more peace and love and smoothness and connection. Is so cool. So thank you again. I'm so grateful that you decided to be a part of this. You're so cool.
Hey, thank you. Just a delight.
And I'm going to stop this recording and we'll share with all the mamas.
All right.